Morning and welcome to Live at the Legislature, where every week we take you inside the Capitol to talk about the issues, bills, and things going around the state legislature. With us this morning is Representative Richard Onishi. He represents District 3, South Hilo, Puna, and Ka'u. He is also the chair of the House Labor and Tourism Committee. Good morning, Representative, and thank you for being here with us.
Good morning, James.
I'd like to start off asking you about this House Bill 1278. There's been a lot of talk in the media about reducing the burden of unemployment taxes on businesses. Could you explain what this bill is trying to accomplish and how it will help our economy recover?
Well, as everybody knows, businesses in Hawaii have taken a tremendous hit with the pandemic and the closing, the reopening, the closing again. So part of the problem is that our state law and federal mandate is that the amount that an employer has to pay in terms of unemployment insurance benefits, the claims portion, is subject to their experience and the state's overall unemployment rate. So this year, because of the high unemployment that we've experienced during the pandemic, the rate would automatically jump to Schedule H, which is the highest schedule. That would put a huge burden on the employers having to refund the unemployment benefits fund. So what we're doing is HB 1278. It takes the schedule and it resets it at Schedule D, which is one step higher than currently, which is Schedule C, for the calendar years 2021 and 2022. What that does is it reduces the percentage that is charged per salary for the employees that are working. What we also did was we froze the employer's claims experience to the 2019 experience, which is prior to the pandemic, where we had the most, robust employment and the lowest unemployment. So both of those factors will tremendously help the employers with, at the same time, ensuring that we are reimbursing the unemployment fund or rebuilding the unemployment fund. The third thing that we did was we also we didn't freeze. We allowed the director to adjust the repayment of unemployment benefits for nonprofit organizations. So that'll help out the nonprofit organizations whose grants and aid that goes to them normally to do the work that they do has been also drastically reduced. And it doesn't really account for unemployment claim benefit payments.
See, so it helps businesses and nonprofits too.
Right, correct.
What is the status of the bill and why does it need to become law so quickly? So
the unemployment schedule applies to the calendar year. So it applies to this year, 2021. And the unemployment division at the Department of Labor does the calculations for the year in March, after March 6th. So the House had a joint meeting of the Labor and Tourism Committee and the Finance Committee to pass out HB 1278. The Senate has scheduled for Wednesday a hearing between the Labor and the Ways and Means Committee. It's another joint meeting. If they pass it out on Wednesday, it'll go to the floor for the vote. If it passes the Senate as is, it then goes directly to the governor so we can meet the deadline of March 6th for the recalculation using the Schedule D rate.
I see. It has to be all done that quickly.
Yes, if we want to get it done this year to help the employers this year.
Well, in your committee is labor and tourism. So tourism is so critical to our economy as well. What is the outlook for tourism in your view?
Well, right now, many of the economists are projecting we might hit about 4 million visitors for this fiscal year, which ends on June 30th. But that's still conjecture. It just depends on the experiences throughout the world with the virus. As you know, we opened up to Japan, but the amount of visitors from Japan has been affected by the requirement that if they go back to Japan, they have to quarantine for 14 days, regardless of whether or not they have taken a COVID test and have come up negative. We just opened to Korea. The same criteria exists in Korea, a 14-day mandatory quarantine. We do have open travel between Canada, which is an important market for us, but those are the main overseas markets. The US, as we all know, is still in a significant, COVID experience. People are reluctant to travel. So, we'll see how, if things get better on the US mainland, then, travel might increase. One of the most interesting things that has come up is the consideration of something like a vaccine passport, where if you have taken both shots of the vaccine or you've taken the complementary requirements for the vaccine and, you have some form of immunity, you might be able to travel without having to take a test. There's been discussion about doing it inter-island first and then possibly overseas. The biggest concern, though, is the effectiveness of these vaccines that we're currently utilizing with the new variants that have been discovered, and whether or not it would be effective on those variances or other variances that may be discovered.
That would be a great boost for our tourism.
It would be huge if we were to establish some sort of, allowance for people who've taken the vaccine.
Well, I'm afraid that was a quick conversation and all the time we have. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. And see you all at home next week with the House Majority on Live at the Legislature.
Thank you, James.
Planning to offer testimony at a legislative hearing? Here are a few tips to keep in mind. First, to be effective, remember to keep it short. For written testimony, 1 page summing up your views is ideal. For oral testimony, there may be a time limit. See if you can cover the highlights in just a minute. Next, make it really clear right up front whether you're in favor or against the legislation. Don't make them search or wait for that information. Finally, use your own words, and don't read your testimony. Just bring up the main points you want to get across. Let the committee know where you're coming from, why you hold the position you do. Stories are great. They really help to highlight the human side of the legislation. But remember to be concise and keep it short. Thanks for participating at the legislature. We really need more voices to be part of the conversation so the legislature can make the best laws for the state of Hawaii.
So what do you see?
A community that is engaged, empowered, a place where free speech is alive and well.
Tell me more.
For 30 years, thousands of local people on TV sharing their stories, culture, and viewpoints uncensored.
Uncensored? Where can that be?
Right here, my son.
Wow!
Isn't it time to empower your voice?
Aloha, and welcome back to Live at the Legislature. My name's Jacob Aki, and I'm from the Senate Comms Office. Today, we are joined by Senator Stanley Chang. Senator Chang represents Senate District 9, which includes the areas of Hawaii Kai, Kuli'o'o, Niu, Ainahaina, Waialae, and Diamond Head. Senator Chang is also the chair of the Senate Committee on Housing. Senator Chang, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today, Jacob. It's great to be back.
Thank you, Senator. You know, for this upcoming legislative session, you've introduced a number of very innovative bills. One of them, SB 1, which is being called the Aloha Homes Bill, is a bill that you've been working on for the past couple of years. Can you share a bit about what SB 1 aims to do?
Absolutely. SB 1, Aloha Homes, stands for Affordable Locally Owned Homes for All. And my aim has been for the last few years, and continues to be, to end the housing shortage in Hawaii. Now, a lot of folks really believed that the demand from Airbnbs and vacation rentals was what was causing the high price of housing in Hawaii. As we've seen during the pandemic, even though demand from overseas has crashed, housing prices have continued to hit record highs. Just last month, $890,000 for a house on Oahu and over $1 million for a house on Kauai. What we need is more supply. And we need supply that is environmentally sustainable, that is available to all the people of Hawaii on an equal basis, where you cannot make windfall profits. And basically, the Aloha Homes program would take existing state-owned lands near rail stations, build high-density housing with a minimum of cars so that there will be a minimum of traffic impacts, and make those units available on a revenue-neutral basis to the state, so no subsidy, at cost, to Hawaii residents who would be owner-occupants and who own no other real property. So absolutely no overseas investors. And it's my aim that we produce tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of units through this program and end the housing shortage in Hawaii and ensure that every generation in Hawaii has access to an unlimited amount of very reasonably priced housing for our children and to raise a family.
Thank you, Senator. And as the Housing Chair, you've also introduced a bill to create the Department of Housing. As you know, we do have many agencies that deal with the issue of housing here in our state. So what would this bill to create the Department of Housing do?
Well, you're exactly right, Jacob. We have an alphabet soup of agencies that deal with housing, including HHFDC, HPHA, the Office of Planning, the TOD Council, and so on. And what we're trying to do with this bill is, as a symbolic measure more than anything else, to consolidate those agencies under one state cabinet level department, the Department of Housing, which would send a strong signal to all the people of Hawaii, including the legislature, including the governor and the executive branch, that housing is now going to be one of the core missions of the state of Hawaii, just like the Department of Transportation, the Department of Education, and remind everybody that it is the state's responsibility to end the housing shortage here.
We're going to move on to a different topic, a topic that is very interesting to me. You also introduced SB 721, and SB 721 would look to create a continuous legislative session. Can you share a bit about that too?
Yeah, so that's a bill that's based on my experience as a Honolulu City Council member. And Honolulu, like the other 3 counties of Hawaii, have continuous council sessions. There's no adjournment sine die, and even opening day is more of a formality because there's no deadlines for any bill except the budget. Every bill must receive multiple hearings, 3 hearings, just like we have here. Every bill goes to committee here. But there's a more deliberate pace. There's no need to dump the kitchen sink, into bill introduction before the deadline, because there's no deadline for bill introduction. And if there are, disputes among the stakeholders, a committee chair can very easily say, well, take a month and come back to us with common ground, with a compromise proposal next month, or 3 months from now, or 6 months from now. And perhaps most importantly, by getting rid of the deadlines, we would get rid of the mad rush, the mad sense of urgency that happens with all of the deadlines that happen at the state capitol, in particular, most egregious, in my opinion, being conference. And so it would really help to make the legislative process much more transparent, much more deliberative, and much more easily accessible to the public. And I think that's our duty as state legislators.
Thanks, Senator. So, we've talked about housing. We've talked about possibly reforming government. What are some of your other priorities for this session? This is a very unprecedented session, but, I think folks out there want to know, what are your priorities to deal with some of our state's most pressing issues?
So in addition to the housing crisis, which we've been aiming to solve, one of my personal passions is mental health. The short answer is I know a lot of my friends and a lot of loved ones close to me who have suffered from serious mental health issues. And the pandemic has exacerbated those situations. Recent studies have shown that as much as 90% of young people have experienced some sort of mental health effects. And one of the biggest problems that we face with mental health is the issue of stigma, that it's not treated the same as a physical health condition because people are embarrassed and ashamed. And so one way that we're trying to ameliorate the stigma of mental health is to introduce mandatory annual, or to require insurers to offer annual mental health checkups. Just like you get an annual physical exam, it should now be normal to go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist who can ask you questions, who can ask you in a non-judgmental, totally normal way about if you're having sleep problems, about any of these other issues that might be symptoms of a mental health condition that, can be as serious and debilitating and often much more debilitating than a physical health issue. And I think that because it would be widely available on a widespread basis, I think that would really help to destigmatize mental health conditions.
Thanks, Senator. And, in going through your bill intro list, maybe the last measure that we could talk about is your bill to establish a statewide housing savings. Can you quickly talk about that? Because I think that's something many people out there may not have a full understanding of.
Sure. So here in America, we have Social Security and Medicare, two very successful programs based on payroll savings deductions. In Singapore, they have a third element, which is for housing. And so what I would propose is a 5% opt-out, entirely voluntary savings program, no tax benefits, but also no restrictions on how you spend the money. You can spend it on Christmas presents or a vacation, but it would be called a housing savings account. And hopefully that money would be then available for down payments and for security deposits.
Thanks, Senator. And, time has run out, but we just wanted to say thank you for joining us. And for those at home, we look forward to joining you next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob.
You can now offer in-person testimony on measures being discussed at the Capitol, no matter where you are. When there's a bill up for a hearing, just sign into the legislature's website, capitol.hawaii.gov, click on the testimony button and enter the bill number. After you indicate your position on the bill and upload any written testimony you want to submit, just click the box that lets them know you'd like to testify remotely. You'll be provided with instructions on where to go from there. You'll be able to zoom into the proceedings and speak to the committee at the appropriate time.
It's very important to have Melea'e here.
The experience of local artists that are going to be the future of our music here in Hawaii.
There's a huge music scene that is pretty underground.
This is a great platform to get seen. All genres that exist are out here, and there's people that love it and that are making it.
That gives us as young and even older musicians an opportunity to share our music that we never ever had before.
To bring you into the Capitol this session, all the hearings and briefings are being live streamed on YouTube. You can watch them in real time or catch up on them later when it works for you. Find the House and Senate YouTube links on the new Live in Demand video page. Just go to the legislature's website and click on the Live and On-Demand Video button and see for yourself. Need help keeping up with what's happening at the Capitol? Contact the Public Access Room for more tips.
Aloha and welcome back to the Legislative Minority segment of Live at the Legislature. I'm Aloha Lindsay, your host, and joining us today from, he's at the Capitol with his beautiful sticker on his shirt that he passed the temperature check, is Representative Bob McDermott.
There you go. Hey, good morning.
Representative.
Good morning.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us this morning. So
sure.
The first question I have is one we've kind of been asking to at least the past two guests is, what have been the biggest changes that you've seen this year at the legislature so far?
Well, obviously the lack of interaction with the public, the opportunity for people to come in and meet us and talk to us and share their views on particular issues, that's remarkably different.
And do you see that? I know one thing has been, neighbor islanders and people who live in the country areas are able to testify. Do you find that that's been more effective in your committee hearings?
Well, I think generally speaking, Zoom, we'll call it Zooming, although we're using Microsoft here, but it's added another dimension to how we receive information. And you can conduct meetings now with three people in different locations regarding a legislative issue, where before you'd have to get together and meet. Now we're becoming used to where we can meet over the Zoom, if you will. So I think that's helpful. I do miss the in-person contact. There's nothing like that. Like there's nothing like the personal written letter that has more impact than an email. You get thousands of emails, but the handwritten letter has more impact.
Absolutely. And to transition, I guess, to the next question with in-person gatherings, there was an article in the Star Advertiser that mentioned the Lieutenant Governor has said that we might be able to have large gatherings by as early as summer. You have the biggest high school in the state of Hawaii in your district, Campbell High School. I imagine people would want large gatherings after their kids graduate from high school. So can you talk about the work you've been doing there?
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. This affects everybody. You know, as a state legislator, you deal with statewide issues. So can we have safe graduations for our kids? Last year we did drive-throughs. Campbell did a virtual. My daughter graduated last year. My last son is a senior this year. So how do we give them an opportunity to shine and do it safely? So it's not going to be, we're working towards that. We're going to be on the cusp of herd immunity around graduation time. We may not be there, but we'll be on the cusp of it. So is there a way to do it safely with certain protocols to enable kids to graduate? So Campbell's got 600 kids plus 640, I think 648, and then you add two parents. So you're up to 2,000 people already. So can you do that? Yes, you can, but you would eliminate extended family from coming, right? Just the parents and the children, and that would be it. But you could still do it safely. The challenge you'd have, of course, is the kids want to hug each other, haven't seen each other in a year in many cases, right? And so, but the good news is the kids are almost invulnerable to this COVID. So it's the older people my age, the parents, and some of the administrators and faculty who may be susceptible. So to protect them, certainly you could opt out. And how do you get your arms around that? So we're meeting with some people to see how we can move that forward.
Excellent. And what are some of the other issues that are going on in Ewa Beach? It's always
yeah. Always the schools and improvement for the schools and funding for school improvement, which is particularly difficult this year because although capital improvement projects are funded by general obligation bonds, we're still being very cautious on debt service and what we want to spend. So that's a challenge. It's going to delay this economic impact is going to delay everything for several years, the process. And then, of course, you have traffic issues and finishing the Fort Weaver Road widening on both ends, the freeway entrance and exit, and then all the way at the back end towards the parks. It needs to be completed. So those are the major issues.
Okay. And you're actually in a very unique position at the legislature in that you serve both on the House Special Committee on COVID-19 and also the House Committee on Finance. So you get sort of what's your big picture analysis of what the legislature's been doing and what we're doing to help the folks.
So let's take the COVID committee first. Although they haven't delivered a particular work product, if you will, various elements of it have, I think of Professor Bonham at the UH has provided spot-on economic analysis, which has been very helpful to the policymakers like myself to chart a path forward if we can. And then I've been really thrilled with the performance of Mr. Vera of Hawaii Pacific Health. They set up that vaccination center, Pier 2, at his own initiative, ran into some roadblocks and contacted the speaker, and the speaker literally got them the keys to the building so they could go in there. Now, they went in there and spent about $2 million of their own money, Hawaii Pacific Health, to get that facility up to snuff where they could actually provide mass vaccinations. So those are the kind of things that the public doesn't read about, but it's very important to know these things just don't happen overnight. And that was the private sector who initiated that and stepped up to the plate. And they have been the leaders in the medical field as far as with regard to this COVID. The state has Department of Health has kind of lagged behind, been more of a follower instead of a trailblazer. And of course, they've lost a director, a deputy director. So they've had a lot of turmoil in the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the challenging and unprecedented times continue. Another question that I think we've been asking for the past couple of times is just a message of hope. So what brings you optimism for the rest of this year and just for the rest of this legislative session?
Oh, good question. I think the pace of vaccinations is going to increase. Everybody's pushing for it. And I think with that being the case, we can really look forward to around June, we can have graduations, or the end of May. We can have high school graduations, and that would be the first major signal of a return to normalcy. I think that's what we're looking for. You can already see Alaska drop their travel restrictions where you had to get a COVID test. So we're still very cautious and safe, but we're on the cusp of this herd immunity, if you will, or the vaccinations of so many people who are vulnerable. We should be okay.
Absolutely. Lord willing, it's definitely exciting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully summertime and all that. So we are just about out of time. Representative McDermott, thank you for joining us. A quick conversation. Thanks again to the folks at Olelo and the folks at home for joining us. We will see you next week. Aloha.
Thank you. Bye.